abrupt ending of the last stream, but my internet crapped out there for a minute. So luckily, we had already completed section 3 of Confusion in the Cosmos. So I'm going to go ahead and do section 4. Again, the views and opinions expressed in this book are not necessarily my personal views and opinions. However, I definitely agree with a lot of it. This book is definitely intended for Christian believers. I typically, personally, don't, when I'm making a case for flat Earth, include biblical arguments, but this book certainly does, and I do think it's a good book. Friends of mine have recommended it, even to the point where they sent me this copy and asked that I would consider doing the audiobook, and so that's why I'm doing it, is for my friends. So, and I know there's a lot of you out there that enjoy it, and there's definitely good information in here as well, so don't take this as me disagreeing with all of it either. Just being clear. And so I'm going to go ahead and continue on with Confusion in the Cosmos, Part 4, The Flood of Noah. Again, this is written by Miguel Stephano. Psalm 104, you covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters were standing above the mountains. So the waters above the firmament were released during the Great Flood from the quote-unquote floodgates, also known as windows and doors of heaven, along with breaking open the fountains of the great deep. These methods were used to bring destruction upon the whole earth because it had become too corrupt and men would not turn from their evil ways. The windows of heaven were not heavy rains, as some think, but were literal openings in the firmament that allowed the heavy dumping of water at an inconceivable rate. The purpose for this flood can be better understood through the fallen angel incursion that created hybrid giants that we briefly outlined in the introduction section. We read about the animal and human hybrids that needed to be destroyed off the face of the earth. Again, these went against the Most High's laws of creation, and these hybrids were abominations in God's eyes. We're told today that these hybrids are mythology, but they did exist. This is why the animals also had to be extinguished in the flood, and only pure bloodline animals were saved on the ark. And then there's an image here, examples of hybrid small g gods, image courtesy of Deposit Photos. I'm not going to try to show, but it's... I can't think of the name. Maybe I can try and show it. Let's see. Can y'all see this? There you go. I think that came in there, didn't it? Yeah. Okay. In this chapter, we will get to some evidence of the flood later. Wait a minute. So, in this chapter, although we will get to some evidence of the flood later, we're mostly looking at the flood account to enhance our understanding of it with proper cosmology. Think about how the Great Flood could work on a spinning globe. The whole idea of it defies all physics as well as logic. It is this author's belief that this story could really only work if the Earth were inside an actual container, and this author has never heard of anyone mention this concept in this regard. Could you perform any experiment by pouring water on any sized sphere and get it to stick without flowing off? Now try this with the sphere spinning while moving thousands of miles per hour. You must keep in mind that in every experiment ever conducted, water seeks the lowest point, takes the shape of the container that it is in, and always levels itself out on its surface. Water is always level, and in fact has always been used to establish and find level. Please imagine this for a few moments and then continue. Level, the definition of level: to make a line or a surface horizontal, make flat or level. Plumb, straight down or straight up. Vertically, exactly vertical or true. Have you ever used a construction or spirit level with the bubble that verifies true plumb and level? How would this fundamental tool work on the side of a round sphere and enable you to verify perfect plumb or true level? The whole reason for the spirit level is to confirm exact plumb and level regardless of ground conditions present, and would be impossible to work accurately around a ball with detectable curvature using this tool. Plumb is always perfectly vertical or straight upward, while level is always side to side, being horizontal or at 90 degrees. They're always exactly perpendicular to each other at 90 degrees. As a side note, this author knows a gentleman considered to be an expert in concrete construction who has decades of experience. He made this realization after watching some documentaries questioning the shape of the earth and thinking this through. In his daily use of the spirit level in a construction real-world application, he realized the impossibility of it working around a sphere, and epiphany ensued. This man now sees the world entirely different than previous and is trying to share this realization with others. Everyone has a different awakening moment, and the spirit level became his aha moment. Eureka. So that's a true story, but we need to get on with this expedition. So grab your imaginary scuba gear and let's wade a little deeper into the great flood of Noah account. To start this, we need to first establish if there was really water in the heavens above the firmament. So Genesis 1:7, and the Most High made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And then Psalm 148, praise him, highest heavens and the waters that are above the heavens. Again, Psalms. So we've confirmed water above. Scripturally, now that we understand these are literal waters as described and not some layers of moisture in the air, we can look at this story with a different perspective. Now, what about these floodgates in the firmament? Can we confirm they exist scripturally? Genesis 7:11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day, all the fountains of the deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were also opened. And then Genesis 8:2, also the fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained. See how the floodgates are clearly differentiated from the rain. It is explaining three sources of water. First, the fountains of the deep bursting from the ground like powerful geysers. Two, the floodgates of the sky dumping massive volumes of water. And three, there was a tremendous storm by rain in addition to these other sources. There were also massive earthquakes taking place by shaking the earth, and probably much volcanic activity as well. These floodgates are literal openings within the firmament, and these floodgates are also the same thing when being described as windows, doors, and chambers of heaven, as they are being referred to by different authors. Genesis 7:11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Psalm 78, though he had commanded the clouds from above and opened the doors of heaven. Jasher 6:14, and all the fountains of the deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Isaiah 24:18, for the windows above are opened, and the foundations of the earth shake. And in those days shall punishment come from the Most High of spirits, and he will open all the chambers of waters which are above the heavens, and of the fountains which are beneath the earth. The one who builds his upper chambers in the heavens and has founded his vaulted dome over the earth, he who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the face of the earth. The Lord is his name. Amos 6. We go back to Jasher 6:11. And on that day, the Lord caused the whole earth to shake, and the sun darkened, and the foundations of the world raged, and the whole earth was moving violently, and the lightning flashed, and the thunder roared, and all the fountains in the earth were broken up, such as was not known to the inhabitants before. And the Most High did this mighty act in order to terrify the sons of men, that there be no more evil upon the earth. Jasher 6:11. Continuing with Jasher 6, and all the fountains of the deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Jubilees 5:24. And the Lord opened up the 7 floodgates of heaven, and the mouths of the fountains of the great deep, 7 mouths in number. And the floodgates began to pour down water from the heaven 40 days and 40 nights. And the fountains of the deep also sent up waters until the whole world was full of water. Jubilees. Psalm 29, the Lord sits upon the flood, yea, the Lord sitting king forever. Jasher 6:34, and the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. Genesis 8, also the fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained, and the water receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of 150 days the water decreased. Jasher 6, and the fountains of the deep and the windows of the heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. Okay, so that's sort of ending with the biblical references for a moment. How could these floodgates or windows of heaven be explained on a globe Earth? People have tried to create theories around this global narrative by coming up with things that are not at all biblical. They have concocted strange quote-unquote canopy theories in which to insert these metaphoric windows and doors of heaven as an attempt to explain from where all this water came. It is alleged that these were theoretic heavy atmospheric clouds comprised into a canopy formation that were in the sky before the flood, but then gone after the flood because it rained so much. This is a very far-reaching and incorrect theory, according to this author. We do not have to theorize so much by inventing new things of no basis when we read this account under the lens of the correct cosmology that literally has a firmament with openings within it. The quote-unquote floodgates were opened to flood the earth at a rapid, decisive, and immeasurable rate. We can only try to conceive the damage to the earth that took place from this watery cataclysm, and whatever we could picture would still be unfounded. Ponder for a moment on how we look around at this beautiful earth with all its amazing features and awe-inspiring beauty. But we're actually living in a realm that was destroyed through this cataclysm event, and we're only seeing the remainder of what is left over and has regrown back ever since. Could this be why so much of the earth and its mountains appear to be so weathered? Consider the vast amount of water it would take to cover the entire earth to be deep enough to fill in every valley and still rise above the tallest mountaintops. After the waters were held back and ceased from coming forth, the waters receded for about 10 months, and then the mountaintops were finally visible again. It then continued to recede until the earth was fully abated, with the ground surface finally being dried up. Try to process the unimaginable amount of water that needed to be drained from the whole face of the earth. Where did all this water go? Where would all this water drain if the earth were a spinning globe? Did it all spin off into outer space? Genesis 7:19, the water prevailed more and more upon the earth, so that all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered. Psalm 104, you covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters were standing above the mountains. Jubilees 5:26, and the waters increased upon the earth. 15 cubits did the waters rise above all the high mountains, and the ark was lifted up above the earth, and it moved up the face of the waters. Genesis 8:5, the water decreased steadily until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. Genesis 8:11, the dove came to him toward evening, and behold, in her beak was a freshly picked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the water was abated from the earth. Jasher 6:35, and the waters decreased in those days, and the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. Jubilees 5:28, and the ark went out and rested on the top of Lubar, one of the mountains of Ararat. And finally, Genesis 8. Now it came about in the 601st year, in the first month, on the first of the month, the water was dried up from the earth. Then Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the surface of the ground was dried up. Let me put this phone on Do Not Disturb again. My goodness. Sorry, y'all. Okay, sorry about that. Was dried up, right? So that was Genesis 8:13. So again, we now know that much of this water came from the floodgates within the firmament. But where did all this water go after it receded? You may already be onto this, and the book of Jubilees actually confirms our suspicions. Jubilees 5:29, and on the new moon in the 4th month, the fountains of the great deep were closed, and the floodgates of heaven were restrained. And on the new moon of the 7th month, all the mountains of the abysses of the earth were opened, and the water began to descend into the deep below. Right. So all the water that sprung up from the ground, rained, and was poured out from heavens above the firmament was drained back into the deep waters that are underneath of the earth. Without this understanding of the role of these floodgates coupled with the great deep and how they work within an enclosed cosmology, people are left with the belief that this story is a quote-unquote global fairy tale and cannot be true because none of it makes any sense upon a spinning ball. I hope that you can see that through this historical event, this method of abatement is undeniably impossible on a globe. Is there any additional proof of this flood? This is another book topic, but the answer lies within your viewpoint and how aware you are of certain findings of sea creatures found in all places, all over the world, in areas they shouldn't be. Let's briefly address some things that could easily be argued as proof of this great flood event. First, bones and fossils of whales and other marine animals were found by scientists in mountain sediments high up in the Andes. Their conclusion was that mountains must have risen very rapidly out of the sea when forming. But it seems much more logical that these discoveries would be solid evidence to corroborate a flood, or the flood, right? On Mount Everest, at the top of its peaks, they found many fossils of sea creatures, shells, and sea lilies discovered at 25,000 feet above sea level and even higher. The explanation was that these fossils were remains from millions of years ago prior due to a great continental drift event. But another conclusion could again ascertain that sea creature fossils on Mount Everest are absolutely proof of this great flood. In 2010, while doubling the lanes on a highway in a Chilean desert, workers found a whale graveyard consisting of about 40 skeletons facing mostly in the same direction, along with dolphins, seals, and large fish. Their theory was that these enormous sea creatures may have been killed off due to an algae bloom and then probably washed up on land. Although these were only about half a mile from shore, they were found at about 130 feet above its sea level. So another person could theorize that as the flood waters receded back under the earth, these animals were choked out and never made it back into the ocean. In the hot and dry Egyptian desert, there have been, there have also been full whale skeletons that have been found, one even over 65 feet long. They postulate that there was a huge prehistoric ocean about 37 million years ago that covered the area, and these whales are the prehistoric remnants from this ocean. But another person might question, could these skeletons actually last 37 million years? Sorry, y'all. I'm having trouble here. Forgive me. Yeah, could these skeletons actually last 37 million years? They could say with utmost confidence that finding whale skeletons in the middle of the Egyptian desert obviously substantiates the flood of Noah. Other evidence that could easily support the flood includes 90-foot fruit trees unearthed in African and Australian deserts, fossils of 50-foot crocodiles, 5 to 6 foot long dragonflies, foot-long cockroaches, giant beavers, etc. There have been mammoths found frozen in upright position with undigested food in their stomach, 300-foot trees found 1,000 feet below the Earth's surface while drilling for oil, plant leaves in the ice in Antarctica, artifacts and tools found inside coal, petrified trees standing upright through many different rock layers, and many other things. Could the fault lines that we see all around the world be a result of this cataclysmic event? Many of these ancient cities have been unearthed in excavations in recent years. This author believes they will continue to find that these were cities established before the flood and consequently were buried as a result of the flood. The majority of the living ancient trees found around the world appear to be in the 4,000 to 5,000 year range at their oldest. This author believes this to be very convincing, but you also have to remember, how could science allow this to get out and support the flood narrative? Well, simply they don't. It is alleged that there are about 5 trees found still living that are between the age of 9,000 to 1 million years old. The biggest problem that this author has with this is these are reproducing that stems die off after hundreds of years and the root systems are said to regenerate. The methods of dating these were established through carbon dating of the roots, which this author believes is not accurate at all. Kent Hovind points out in his research in support of intelligently designed creation through his creation seminars that there have been many living animals that were dated using these methods. In several cases, they were shown to be dead for thousands of years. I hope you caught the part that these animals were still living. Therefore, these carbon dating methods cannot be depended upon solely as being accurate. Among all the potential flood evidence, the most compelling is the fossil record itself. A fossil can only be created due to a rapid burial event that took place while the organism was still alive. Animals do not die and then get covered by layers of earth over millions of years, creating a perfect fossil. They were completely encapsulated and buried due to an unescapable cataclysm that enshrouded and preserved them forever in a pressurized tomb. This author believes that the Great Flood created the majority of the fossils found today. One of the finds which leads me to a better understanding of the antediluvian period, or the pre-flood world, was coming across the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. The first United States monument under President Roosevelt in 1906. It is theorized that the tower structure was created due to a volcanic plug erupting from within the earth 40 to 50 million years ago. But where is there a proven example of volcanic lava that can produce enormous hexagonal column strands straight into the air almost 1,000 feet in height, mimicking hexagonal strands found in living organisms like plants and trees? Lava will always flow to a low point and spread out in every case, except when they need it to cover up remnants of prehistory like this one. It is this author's belief that this is, without a doubt, a giant tree from pre-flood times that petrified during the flood event, leaving it as a stone remnant of the past for visitors to see and still used by rock climbers throughout the year to this day. From its base to its summit is 867 feet tall, and at the summit's top about 180 feet by 300 feet in width. So here's a picture of what he's describing here. Okay. So sorry. Okay, doesn't this look like an ancient tree stump? This isn't the only one, as these are actually found all over the world with similar hexagonal columns being petrified. There are actually some mountain landscapes similar to Devil's Tower that this author believes were ancient trees, which were cut down for whatever reason by giants and fallen angels in those days. Maybe the animated movie Avatar was a much closer representation for a pre-flood world context than many of us have understood. So again, those images were Devil's Tower in Wyoming, and then that was the top. The bottom one is Devil's Tower, Wyoming, hexagonal column structures, right? So there are many locations around the world where ancient cities have been found that are now completely covered by oceans or other large bodies of water. Sorry. 5,000 years or older. Wait a minute. Covered by water. Many of these cities are even dated to 5,000 years or older, which could easily stand as another proof of the Great Flood, raising water levels to higher than pre-flood levels. These are found in India, China, Greece, Egypt, and Peru, among others. One site in particular is found off the island of Yonaguni in Japan, where they found a complete underwater ziggurat pyramid that they claim dates back to 10,000 years ago. Another way to hide the Most High Creator is to discredit his word, his creation, and his judgment, like Noah's flood, by reducing them to mere myths. But the reality is that all across the world, through many cultures and languages, there are ancient stories and legends that have been passed down through the generations regarding a great flood event. These legends all describe a catastrophic worldwide flood that wiped out the Earth's population, with the exception of 8 people who survived on a large boat. So here you have the biblical account, other ancient text accounts, and the subsequent civilizations all confirming the same story, and it is dismissed all because, in my mind, it makes no logical sense on a globe. Has the Ark ever been found? Well, there have been claims through the years from explorers who thought they possibly came across the Ark remains at certain sites, but these were dismissed as unlikely. The strongest evidence, however, seems to be from the late amateur archaeologist Ron Wyatt. He had discovered several biblical locations on his many trips to the Middle East, including the actual location of the Rock of Horeb, the giant rock that Moses struck on Mount Sinai that gushed water for the thirsty Israelites, on the Mountain of God, the Red Sea crossing location during the Exodus, and Sodom and Gomorrah's burnt cities remains, among many other locations and finds. Ron Wyatt found the Ark in the mountains of Ararat in Turkey at an elevation of 6,300 feet above sea level in 1977. His story is very convincing in regards to his measurements of the remains being the exact length given in Genesis, although the width was a little wider than dimensions given. Ron pointed out how the walls of the Ark fell outward over the 4,500 years of decomposing. The Turkish government actually acknowledges the site, but will not allow any excavations. They did, however, allow Ron to perform a 6-inch soil core sample at a depth of 5 feet in lieu of a larger excavation to see if anything could be found. The soil within the single core sample taken included a petrified antler, petrified animal dung, cat hair, red human hair, and a fiber similar to what we know as fiber optic cable. Ancient metal rods, washers, and fasteners were found on the site. that were sent to independent labs for testing, which found these metals were man-made and actually contained amounts of aluminum and titanium within their metallurgic chemistry. Additionally, there were about 13 enormous sea anchor stones used to weigh down a very large ship that were found close by, high up in the mountains as well. Some of these anchor stones displayed 8 carved crosses, one for each person, and ancient writings that cannot be translated to this day. Dr. Salih Baraktuten, forgive the butcher, a Turkish geologist, was quoted by Common Sense as saying, quote, "It's a man-made structure and for sure it's Noah's Ark," end quote. He was also quoted on the History Channel as saying, quote, "Very similar to an ark in the dimensions, the length, the width, and the height are very, very close to the figures given in the books." Others have also agreed that based on the evidence found, it could only be the degrading structure of the infamous ark. The locals in the area have believed this as well by calling the area below it the Valley of Eight, referring to Noah and his family first settling there. There is also a visitor center, and people come from all over the world to visit the site each year. Can any of this be proven? Not likely anytime soon. There has never been a movement. Sorry, y'all, I keep messing up my phone here. There has never been a movement to try and corroborate or prove the flood, only theories in order to discredit everything around the story. The science community wants this to be kept a myth and will do everything to keep it that way. But in spite of this, it is this author's belief that this is likely the actual site of what remains of Noah's Ark. The residual effects from disbelief of the flood event not only void the reality of God's complete judgment and wrath within the story, but also remove the ability to ascertain the seed war, so-called, being initiated in Genesis 3, which is at its root followed by the fallen angel incursion of Genesis 6, which brought forth the necessity for this catastrophic and fatal circumstance. We will discuss this so-called seed war more in a later part, but my point is, by not understanding this flood story completely, many other related components of biblical history are lost as well. In conclusion of the flood of Noah, this author believes the enclosed system model works far better than it could ever work on a spinning globe. Please review this illustration at the end of this part and make your own conclusions. I also believe that enclosed cosmology is further confirmed with the understanding that we live in a pressurized system. How do you get a pressurized system in an atmosphere that is surrounded by the vacuum of space? What would keep our system pressurized while still allowing rockets to pass through? In my mind, the flood account of Noah in Genesis and other texts further uphold the idea that biblical and ancient cosmology is both true and correct cosmology. How else can you explain the floodgates, the fountains of the deep, water above the mountaintops, and the draining of such tremendous volumes of water? And so here's the illustration by the author here. There you go. And that's going to end section 4. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this chapter. And I will see you very soon in part 5, which will be video 6 in the series. We're not even halfway through this thing, so there's a lot to do. But thank you guys. One love, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.